Boom, what's up everyone? Welcome to Simulation. We are featuring Joe Hudson today, and we're going to be talking about conscious development. We're going to be talking about his workshop, Tide Turners, and what it means with the future of self-actualization. Thanks so much for coming on to the show.
A pleasure.
This is awesome. I'm really excited to have you. We have a lot to talk about regarding conscious development. There seems to be a lot that is not really talked about regarding how one grows and evolves.
Yeah.
And so, you know, how did you get to this point of obsessing with like human evolution to the degree of hosting these workshops and helping people get to their best?
Yeah, and it is an obsession. I think that's a great way to put it. It started just in my own personal development. So 20-something years ago, I went to a 10-day meditation retreat, and some light turned on.
Was it Vipassana?
It was.
Yes, Vipassana, awesome.
It was like getting a drug and getting addicted. And so on the third day of the Vipassana meditation, I had an experience of, like, I would say, like oneness with the universe, and it lasted like 8 seconds.
Yeah.
And then I was like hooked. I was like, how do I get more of this? And so, which was an infinitely horrible way to go about it, trying to get more of it or trying to get somewhere.
Yeah.
But I didn't know that at the time, and I was like ambitious and young and like just motivated. So I just went around and looked for every tool that I could find to develop myself and to get back to the state that I had found. And to the point where there was like 7 years where I just sat in a room and looked at a tree, worried about money from time to time, but like that's what I was doing, trying to get this state back. And eventually that started to wear down, and I was like, oh, it's time to like have kids, and so I needed to make money. But what I realized was that there's no way I was going to make money and provide for my family and be happy and be the father that I wanted to be unless I figured out how to make business itself a spiritual practice, unless development of myself was part of business.
Yeah.
And then what I found through that, and I found that I ended up being a venture capitalist, and all this stuff happened. But one of the things that I found was that my perspective and the perspective of the CEO was the most important thing to the investment, more than anything else, right? Because there's a golden rule of venture capital. There's no idea so good, bad management can't screw it up. That's not how we say it, but you know. Yeah. And so I realized that the perspective of management and my perspective being on the board and part of management was the most critical aspect of the business. And so I started to coach people, both in philanthropy that I was doing and in the venture capital work, and then just more and more people wanted it, and so that's how the whole thing turned out. Yeah, and it's my passion. It's what I invest in. I invest in conscious development.
Yes.
My philanthropy is in conscious development, and then what I do on the side is in conscious development. Yeah.
So this sort of the integration of spirituality, or this sort of meditative practice, or this oneness with the universe, this sort of collectiveness that we may be, whatever you want to call that, source or God or whatever that feeling is, integrating that into business is something both huge for you as well as huge for you teaching other people. Yeah. And how do we do that?
Yeah, I look at it a little differently now. Now the way I look at it is there's just humans develop in a certain way, right? Like little kids, for instance, like you say to them, hey, what do you want for Christmas? I want a G.I. Joe with a Kung Fu grip. What does mom want for Christmas? G.I. Joe with a Kung Fu grip. What does dad want for Christmas? G.I. Joe with a Kung Fu grip. And as they get a little bit older, that sense of self changes, and they can identify, I want a G.I. Joe, but mom wants a Tesla, right? They can start to identify that difference. That's just natural human development. If we don't get traumatized, the natural human development is unity consciousness, right? So the sense of self moves from me to family to tribe to country to people to environment to oneness. It's just a natural progression that happens as long as it's not messed up. So I don't see it as a spiritual thing anymore. And what's really cool is that as humanity is evolving in this way, the economy evolves in this way, just naturally, right? Yeah. So one way to look at it is as the consciousness develops, our context also develops. So we go from this or this to this and or this, to if then this, to truth is contextual, to I can change the context, to, oh wow, it's all one, right? That's the same thing. And if you look at the economy, the agrarian economy was if this, then that, was this or this. The industrial economy is if then this, where they're optimizing every little bit, right? And then we get into a contextual economy of the internet. So every time that the development of humanity kind of crosses a threshold, a whole new way of doing business shows up. And it's the same in management. There's different consciousnesses.
As consciousness increases, business strategies come up with that rise.
That absolutely right. Yeah. And everything, art comes up with it, business comes up, the way we manage comes up, the way we organize companies comes up. And what you'll notice is that not always, but typically as people are rising through, they become more effective in their management. They become more effective. And
totally.
There are some stages where it kind of gets a little wonky for a while, but ultimately, as we do it, we get better at what we're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's how I see it now. I don't see it as like spirituality, though.
That's good.
A lot of the methods that I'm using are spiritual methods.
Yeah, let's stay on that thought that you started us with, which was that every child is on a trajectory to unity.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's really fascinating in itself, is if they're not impeded by some sort of trauma or some sort of economic or political pressures that choke the unity out of them.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, mostly parenting.
Mostly parenting.
Mostly parenting.
I've been for the longest time saying that the parent is the God to the child, and it's the parent's responsibility to be a really good leading figure for the child to figure out what they're passionate about, and
Yeah, so I'll see that a lot, and it's not just God, it's money, which is really weird. So if you look at people, and if they had very authoritarian parents, their God is usually very authoritarian. If they had very loving parents, their God is very loving. Also, the way they treat money is like that. If the love was something that they had to work for really hard, oftentimes their relationship with money is something that they have to work for really hard. So oftentimes the parental relationship gets substituted into money or God. And so oftentimes with CEOs, one of the things that I have to work on is, I'd like to work on is like, how are we changing the consciousness around money? And that requires oftentimes work around relationship with the parents. Yeah.
Okay, so let's stay here for just a moment more. So we have this child that's born into the world, and we have their parents that, depending on how they were raised, are raising the child, and their values are being shown to the child. Sometimes there are these interesting hacks, like the child can be in school and they can learn from a side angle about like environmentalism, and they can come home and be like, yo, we're not using plastic water bottles anymore.
Yeah.
And it's just ridiculous because the parent is like, what? How did that happen?
Yeah.
My values got changed by my kid.
Yeah.
So that's also kind of interesting that kind of development can occur.
Yeah, so that's what we focus on, the philanthropy. All the stuff we do is on the consciousness of kids. So we do mindfulness in schools. We do soul, self-organized learning environments, which are kind of the intellectual form of development, inquiry-based development. We do hand-in-hand parenting, which is an emotional form of the developmental process.
This happens at Tide Turners?
No. This is just my philanthropic stuff.
So your philanthropic stuff, you'll actually go with parent and kid and go through that process?
No, so in the philanthropic stuff, what I do is I fund through the DBJ Foundation, the DBJ Foundation, we fund kids development projects. So we developed something called Inner Explorer. When we got involved, it was like 20 classrooms. There's great leaders there. They've done a fantastic job, but now it's been 5 years and they're touching like 600,000 kids or something like that.
Inner Explorer.
Inner Explorer. So that's one. DBJ. And the Souls, startsoul.org, I think it is, also is another one that we helped found and is now in 20-something countries.
Is this a 2-day workshop as well?
No, these are just nonprofits that we support through philanthropy.
And then they do sessions every...
like the, mindfulness in schools is daily.
Oh, mindfulness in schools. So then they'll go and unleash kind of an ecosystem of teachers into...
That's right. Yeah, that's what we do.
And they'll do mindfulness in school practice.
Yeah, so they're touching 550,000 kids.
A year.
Yeah.
Wow.
Some of them weekly, bi-weekly. Some
That's
of them.
so great.
Yeah. So, and what I do there is that we put in a little bit of money, and then I put a lot of effort into coaching those leaders so that they can be effective and teaching them how to scale organizations, stuff that I learned as a venture capitalist. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, so now I get more about the philanthropic side of things. Okay, that's great. That's wonderful.
And by the way, you're right. It works. The kids meditate at school, and then they come home and they teach their parents.
Yeah.
You know, I think mindfulness, but it's like meditation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Damn, that is the next generation.
Yeah, it is.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah. You want to hear a story that'll just totally give you chills? Yeah. So I was in Cleveland, and it was one of the schools there in Cleveland had taken this up. I would get goosebumps just thinking about this. And there was a kid in there who was having a really, really hard time. And what I was told by this teacher was that he was failing in math, and he just got 100% on a week where his mom witnessed a shooting and had to call the police to get a report for the rental car that she had. And so they beat her up for calling the police. And he still got a great score, 100% on this test. And so I sat to talk to him, and I said, tell me what's going on? And he goes, I just want to thank you. That was it. That's all he had to say. It was just like, I just want to thank you. Like, that's the power of this stuff.
That's how calm the child was?
Totally calm, yeah. And it just aced a test. Yeah, and obviously mindfulness doesn't do that for everybody, but it was a clear win. And there's hundreds of stories like that. Yeah, so that's what we do on the philanthropic side. Yeah.
Whoa, how old is the kid?
The kid was in 3rd grade. Yeah.
Is that like 10 or
9?
9?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I know, right? It's crazy.
Whoa. Yeah, that is incredible.
Yeah.
And it's so weird because some people would, argue that the child experiencing emotion is so important.
Yeah.
And then I guess maybe what I would say to that is that child is experiencing an emotion, but they are not going absolutely bonkers in the direction of absolute hate about the past or about anxiety about the future, but rather they are just staying calm. They experience the emotion, but they're just staying calm in the moment.
Exactly. If you cut off the emotional, a lot of meditators will do that. They'll meditate so they don't have an emotional experience, which really drives you in the wrong direction. I did it for 7 years, I should know. Yeah. It's really important to have that full emotional experience, but to be able to not see it as who you are, just see it as the wave that's coming and moving through you, and has a very deep level of intelligence.
Yeah.
Right? We make decisions emotionally. Like if I pulled out the emotional center of your brain, it would take you a half an hour to decide what color pen to use. We are emotional decision makers. And so the question isn't how do I make a logical decision, it's how do I get good with all these emotions so I can make clear decisions.
How do I get good with the waves that are just coming, with the clouds that are just coming over by, and just understanding that they are just impermanent.
Right.
And then another good one that I thought of as you were talking was that it was another good way to understand. I think I lost it. It might come back, but
no problem.
I really enjoyed that essence of emotional intelligence. You're teaching kids this, and then that ends up catalyzing a much better future moving forward.
That's the whole idea. The whole idea is if we can get these tools into 10 million kids' hands, and the emotional stuff we do is hand-in-hand parenting, which is there's a great book, Listen, by the woman who wrote that, and she amazing book. And that's really about that emotional fluidity for kids, having them really be able to stay connected to their emotional body. Right? So if a kid has trauma, just as an example, if you were physically abused as a kid, heavily physically abused, as an adult, and you hadn't gone through any kind of recovery or healing, as an adult, I could put a quarter in your hand, or a key in your hand, or a can opener in your hand, and you couldn't tell me what it was. Because what the brain does is it disconnects from the body, because that's what needed to happen, which means all the signals that the body has to tell you how to live your life gets just cut off. Right? It's the same emotionally. If somebody's suffered a lot of emotional abuse, they don't have access to those emotions. They've just shut them down, which controls their life because they're making decisions by how do I not feel like a failure? How do I not feel angry? How do I not feel sad?
Yeah.
And their whole life is controlled by trying not to feel some way, which takes, then you have this many solutions instead of this many solutions, right? If I'm like, I'm okay getting angry, not angry at you, not being abusive, but just having the emotion of anger, then I might pick a path that I wouldn't pick otherwise. Yeah.
I remembered what I was going to say,
Cool.
and it was stress resilience.
Right.
So you got that wave coming, and that wave is a very stressful one, whether it be anxiety about the future or about hate about the past. And if you just realize that you're just swaying like a weeble wobble to, you're swaying to one side, and if you can have the homeostasis to swing yourself back into equilibrium fast, you can feel that wave and get back to equilibrium. And even if you were to tell me something that was very angry at me, that I could still feel it and then come back and say that, Joe, why do you feel that way?
Right.
And rather than replying again with anger and just making it worse.
Yeah, I would even say that the way I find most of the anxiety in society today is just fear that is unfelt. Right? Like I notice, like when we do our really deep, long, extensive workshops, and we'll have some work in there where people are deeply get in touch with their fear. As soon as it's done, man, the mind is silent. Everybody is calm. You can just feel the peace in the room because they fully went into the fear and fully had the release of that fear instead of basically trying to manage it all the time, which is pushing it down. Right.
And is that tide turners?
No, tide turners is kind of the entry level stuff.
Where is this at?
This is it's called Earth Shakers. It's an 18-month course.
Earth Shakers.
Yeah, that's the 18-month course. Yeah, and it's like you have to do a tide turners, and then we assess if you're ready for the deeper work.
For Earth Shakers.
For Earth Shakers, yeah.
Okay, so let's unpack these now.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
All right, so that was a lot of good stuff on child development and just stress resilience and mindfulness. That was really profound. I love that. Okay, so now let's go with tide turners. You've been doing this 3 years now. This
3 years.
2-day workshops.
2-day workshop.
Okay, and so conscious development. So tell us about the 2-day workshop.
Yeah, so the 2-day workshop was designed as a way, like I want to give people I'll put it to you this way. Back in the day, if you were studying Zen, all the things that you did in your life, there was a Zen way to do them. There was a Zen way to farm. There was a Zen way to drink tea. There was a Zen, right? But today, we don't farm. We don't drink tea as a way of living. We market.
We drink some tea.
Sell. Yeah, we drink some. We market. We sell. We do things like that. So what are the tools that we can do those with and actually be in our full authenticity? That's the thing that's really important to me. So Tide Turners is designed to be a way of relating to each other that can be brought into sales and product development and management, but also into how you raise your children, to how you are in your marriage, how you are with friends. So it's a really simple technique that we just go over, and then the way the whole workshop is designed is that we teach the state of mind, which is more important than the technique, by felt experience. There's very little talking. And then once the state of mind is grokked, then we teach a very simple technique, and then we just say, okay, let's go through all the problems that we have and just solve them. Let's just go through it. And so people will come in, learn a technique, and then embody it by going through 3 or 4 or 5 of their biggest issues in the weekend and seeing the result of it, and seeing the result of it for other people. And then so it's like a really embedded thing, and we'll do sales issues, and we'll do marriage issues, and we'll take the technique to all that stuff, and we'll just practice it. That's what that's about.
And how does it start out? Does it then start out with people thinking about what their barrier is in the sale or in the marriage?
No, they don't need to at all.
So how does it start out then?
It's usually people come because of conflict. It's like, conflict. Usually people come because of conflict.
And then they say what their conflict is.
And then we go to it.
And how do you kind of target, like, so if it's some conflict in marriage or in sales or whatever, how do you kind of end up figuring out what the most optimal way for them to experience that generative feeling?
Yeah, so what we teach is that, like, if you have the right state of mind, it always works out. Instead of strategy, instead of saying, oh, if I do this and then I'll do this, then I'll get to the place that I want to be, which sometimes works and sometimes doesn't work. What works consistently is like, if I can show up in this way in the conversation, then a solution better than the one that I'm managing for shows up.
So it's a change of a state of mind.
That's right.
Okay, so you change your state, and then the way that you approach the action that you need to take will change. And that way the result will change.
Right.
Okay, that's a very like Robbins-esque approach as well, I remember from his Unleash the Power Within.
The difference that we do is we do it very relationally. So most of the workshop is you do the work with somebody else. And so you're having conversations with
versus
people.
Versus the 15,000 to 1,
Right. So instead of me saying, here's a way that you can get to where you want, it's each other facilitating each other to these deeper experiences so they know they can do it anywhere in their life.
So then you will see my lack in state, my lack in kind of
I wouldn't call it a lack, but
or the growth that I have, growth potential that I have in changing my state to get a change in a result and a change in an action. And then how do you then help? How would you help? Yeah.
So what we do is more. I frame it a little bit differently because I think that the idea that we are in lack is one of the biggest issues that has to be overcome. Right. So for me, the way I frame it is, here's a state of mind, let's experience it together. And then I go through a half a day of exercises so people really understand that state of mind.
And like, what would one of those like state of minds be?
The state of mind is very vulnerable, it's very impartial, it's very curious, and it's very empathetic. So that's the state of mind that we're going
And
for.
how do we get to like a vulnerable and emotional, empathetic state of mind?
You got to come to the workshop.
Got to come to the workshop.
Yeah. So I have a series of exercises where I'm playing with neurochemicals and it just happens automatically.
Things like eye contact.
Eye contact is one of them. I do sometimes do breath work. Oftentimes it's eye contact. It's about how we relate to one another. It's all very relational. And you get to see how rewarding it is, right?
Yeah.
Most people think vulnerability means weakness, but vulnerability just means doing the thing that you're a little scared to do. And people get to experience, oh, what if I do this little scary thing? Oh my God, that's so rewarding. And so they get to experience these kinds of things, And so oftentimes people have massive revelations. You know, at the end of the last tide turners that I did up in Seattle, I get a call from the guy just a little bit later, maybe a month later. He's like, I successfully fundraised my monastery. We have an urban monastery in Seattle funded right now using the tide turner things. I hear about people changing their whole business. It's really cool stuff that happens from it.
That little bit of vulnerability that enables us to grow, that sort of connection that you're talking about, facilitating that between people, ends up, if you can get really good at these, like this, in this 2-day period of practicing these eye contact and changing some of the neurochemical balances within yourself, that then you will take that same practice and embody it with your relationships and with your business, and then that's kind of where this growth happens, because you stop treating other people as just a means to an end, but rather you start treating other people as divine beings. Yeah,
exactly. You're not solving their problems. You're helping them see that they solve their own problems. If you're doing anything at all, that's a big part of it.
Yes.
A good way to think about it is, most of the people who come and pitch me as a venture capitalist, they go, let me tell you what we're doing. And they give me like, they have no idea what I'm interested in. They have no idea what I'm looking for. They're not,
it's so bad.
Right? Which is a very different thing.
The opposite way of what you're supposed to do.
Right.
To walk in there and ask the other person about their life and what they care about, and see if what you're doing is interesting to them. Maybe you can actually help them. That's so interesting.
Then the other one is like the same with marriage. It's usually, if I'm in a marriage, it's like I'm having a hard conversation. What my mind is, how do I get what I need or want, right? How do I get them to stop doing this, or do the dishes, or say the right thing, or love me the way that I want to be loved? And it's the same thing, instead of saying, oh, what's really going on here? And really owning what you want, and then allowing the natural intelligence to move the whole situation. So that's a lot of what the work is,
How would you take a situation like a partner that wants to be loved in a certain way, but that isn't being loved that way by their partner? And how would you know maybe it's time to get the hell out of that relationship?
Yeah. So without any details, that's a really hard thing to know. But and outside of being vulnerable and being empathetic and being impartial about the situation, right? A lot of the times in a relationship, there's something that we don't want to feel. And it might be that we don't want to feel it if they leave, and it might be that we don't want to feel it being in there, but almost all the time there's something that we don't want to feel. Yeah. And if we allow ourselves to feel it, instead of manage our entire reality not to feel it, then the solution just presents itself very, very quickly. But usually there's just something in there that like somebody doesn't want to feel, right? And the power dynamic, whenever it's gotten like that in a relationship, the power dynamic is also off. There's some way in which somebody feels more powerful or less powerful or put upon or responsible or resentful. That's always in there in those relationships. And so the question that is like, how do you come at it internally in a different way so that you can allow that person to be exactly who they want to be, and then you make the decision, do I want to be with them or not? Rather than I want to change them.
That's good. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So then you come at it with a kind of a love for them at the moment that they're in, no matter what their energy they're in, and then you see themselves at their fullest and not in a way that you want to change them. But then when you see them at that state, then you make the decision of like, is this someone that I want to be with or not?
Yeah, or under what circumstances, that's right. But that's the main thing, is that you're not asking someone to change. You're loving them for who they are, and you're not asking them to change.
Is there ever a time that...
Let me just give you the example.
Okay.
If I ask you to change, hey dude, like you should dress differently. Yeah. What's immediately the thing that happens in your system if I'm asking you to change?
Even though the thing that immediately comes up is like,
Right.
Like, well, and then, but for me, I've trained myself to really care a lot about the recommendations that other people are making for me, even if they're coming at it very playfully and kindly, or if they're coming at me harshly. I'm really starting to just, why? Like, tell me why I should dress differently. Why should I speak a different? Why should I ask these questions in a different way? I care a lot about learning now than I do about like just rejecting the advice that people give. And so that might be a conscious development thing as well. Is as long as this vibe increases across the planet, it'll be a lot easier for us to take advice from other people.
Right. Yeah. And there's something even in a 3-year-old where you're like, tell them what to do and they're going to reject. You know, there's going to be that first movement. And so if you really want to have a deep connected relationship with somebody, then the thing is to love them for what they are, who they are, how they are, and then see where they want to go and how they want to develop, and not put your agenda on their life. Putting your agenda on somebody's life is a form of aggression.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
How does one balance like loving someone for who they are when there is something that is an aggressive energy that is maybe coming from that person?
Yeah, that's where the boundaries are really important. That's where the boundaries are really, really important. So, you know, it would be not uncommon for me to say, I love you and I want to be with you, and if you treat me like this, I need to walk away. So the opportunity
there's the boundary.
There's the opportunity is them to be with me under these circumstances, because I get my life. I get to be the person I want to be and be with the people I want to be. So I can stay loving, and I can also say these are the circumstances in which I want to interact with you. In fact, I would say it's impossible to be loving without those boundaries.
That's right.
You know, like if you look at Martin Luther King, or if you look at Gandhi,
because you'll get taken advantage of, or you will get hurt.
But which isn't loving to yourself or to them.
Exactly.
Or to them. So if you look at Gandhi or Martin Luther King, their love required boundaries, and it's no different in a marriage or anywhere else as a CEO.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Yeah, that's a good one. Those boundaries.
Yeah, it's important.
And teaching kids how to set those up as well when they're young. Teaching adults how to set them up, because we don't really.
Adults are hard. For most adults can't really even own what they want fully.
So when you own what you want fully, and then you have maybe a sit down with the person that you want to talk to, and then you come in there with the intention of setting up a boundary, which is that I love myself and I love you, and that there's this boundary which is the way that you maybe aggressively approach me in these types of situations, I can't. That doesn't help my self-love, and I gotta, that's my boundary.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty easy one in my opinion compared to something else that's like, like actual physical violence that you can't necessarily run away from, or that's really difficult to run away from.
Right.
And there's a lot of that happens in the world still. So.
Right. Yeah. Physical violence is a crime, and the way to hold that boundary is to call the police. Yeah. I mean, that's a very different thing.
In other places in the world, it's not even as that
Of
you
course,
can't even get away with calling the police. Yeah.
But see, the interesting thing is what they've noted. So there's this great study that the CDC did about ACEs. Do you know what ACEs are?
What is that?
Adverse childhood experiences.
Okay.
Being beaten, witnessing rape, these kinds of things.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is the more of those that a kid has experienced, the more chance they have, like extremely greater chance of being raped, extremely greater chance of being abused, of having cancer, of like, it's a ridiculous, the more of these traumas that these kids experience, especially if they don't have any tools to work on those traumas, the more they are likely to be in abusive situations, to be violated.
Yep.
And so I don't know how to solve, everything, but what I do know is like, hey, let's work with the kids of today to work on those ACEs. That's the place that I know is the place to work.
Yeah. And then if we can bring the traumatic stress resilience back to equilibrium and then unleash their full potential, that process is so crucial. Otherwise, like you said, that we can get stuck.
Yeah, then it churns into the cycle of violence.
I've also heard, and maybe this works within the ACEs as well, that the experiences that if your roots reach down to hell, then your tree can really blossom towards the heavens.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
For me, what that means is that like you can't avoid the pain. The more that you can invite and embrace the difficult emotions, the more joy there is. So I have a saying, it's that the joy is the matriarch of a family of emotions, and she doesn't come into a house where her children aren't welcome. So if you can't allow for all the negative stuff, then real joy doesn't really take root in your life. Yeah.
That reminds me a lot of what I was telling you earlier about closing off connections to people that I think are less impactful and opening up connections to people that are more impactful.
Yeah.
That reminds me a lot of enabling yourself to experience joy by closing off things that might disrupt your flows of joy. And that can be a really harsh conversation to have with people, which is that, if you can't meet me at my joyful state, if you're going to bring anger, then I have to disconnect.
Yeah. What's interesting there is that a lot of that can also be denial. So the way that I think about that is, like, so I would say it a little differently, like, hey, so this is what I want in my life. And what I notice is that when we're together, this is what happens.
Yep.
And so I'm wondering, how do we want to handle that? Because it's important to me to get this thing that I want in my life. And that's not negotiable.
Yeah.
But how we get there together, I'm really open to.
Okay.
And then I would sit with,
cool.
like, is what they're saying something that actually resonates with me? If not, like, that doesn't quite work for me. But I would be open to the conversation, because that's where a lot of growth happens. That's where a lot of learning happens. And if it's not meant to be, then man, it's over, right? And it happens really smoothly and really nicely, and not with a lot of drama. So, because they don't feel rejected, they've basically rejected you, saying, no, I don't want to meet you in that way. And it's like, okay, cool. The thing about that approach is you really have to be open to the heartbreak. You have to really be there and available for, like, oh, right, I really made myself vulnerable here, and they aren't able to meet me, and that's going to break my heart. And the good news is that heartbreak is what increases our capacity to love. But you have to be open for it. And I think a lot of people draw those really hard boundaries because they don't want to experience the heartbreak. It's like a solid wall inside of them.
Yeah, versus being open to that emotion of potential heartbreak, which is when you are completely open to that, then it's totally evident in the bond between the two people as well. Like, you're totally okay with them walking through the door.
Yeah. Exactly.
And then that's totally evident. Yeah.
So even in my marriage where, like we have a really good marriage, but things happen and marriages evolve, and there's moments where it's like, oh, we're going to have that difficult conversation. And my practice is to actually experience the heartbreak before I go into the conversation. I actually just feel like, oh my God, I might lose my wife or whatever it is, even if it's a little dramatic, and then just fully have that feeling so that when I go in clean. I go in really honoring what she wants and honoring what I want.
This definitely relates a lot to a simulation because if you're basically running simulations in your mind, in your body of what happens if it goes the best, the worst, the middle, all these different ways. And then if you can run those simulations and really feel those feelings ahead of time when you go in there and be totally okay with whichever direction it takes. But also, another part of that is just trying to go towards growth, and no matter where that growth is, wherever that growth takes you.
Yeah, I get weary on that one.
Yeah, tell us why.
Because our nature is to grow. So my experience is the trying to grow gets in the way of the growth. So as an example, like a little kid, they get this urge to be physical. It's like, whoop, there's my urge to be physical. And they just run, and they just play, and they just do their thing. An adult says, oh, I have an urge to be physical, and they go, oh, you know what? I really should get to exercise. I haven't exercised that much. Why am I not working out? Really, I have to work out more. Why am I not doing that?
Yeah, that's right.
That's
overthinking.
They have this natural inclination, and then it gets kind of covered over by this internal dialogue.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's where I see growth is as soon as growth becomes a have to, or something that I should do, or something that I need to do, then a lot of the joy is taken out of it. We just have this natural desire to grow. Like, it is what we want to do. It's like curiosity is built into us. And I say trusting in that is a far quicker process than thinking that there's something wrong with you that has to be fixed.
Yeah.
Like, which is the oak tree that's the perfect oak tree? The one that's 2 feet tall, the one that's 10 feet tall, the one that's 50 feet tall, the one that's dying? Like, which is the perfect oak tree?
But there's also something about looking in a mirror and seeing ourselves for who we truly are.
Oh, yeah.
And then I have to just burn off the shitty parts of myself. And I have to just admit that I have parts to myself that I want to burn off.
Yeah.
And then that objective process, and then also future authoring at the same time, which is I want in a month to achieve this, the goal, in a year to achieve this goal.
Yeah.
And then that process will lead me on a more of a guided trajectory towards growth, towards objectives and stuff like that.
Yeah, I obviously VC, I love goals, I love measuring them, I love accountability. And the balance to that is when I was like 27 years old, I was like, I'm going to be brutally honest with myself. So I wrote on a list of everything about myself that I didn't want to admit. And I folded it up and I put it into a drawer. And I forgot about it, just completely forgot about it. 2 years later, or maybe 18 months later, I pull out the list. And I was like, oh, let's see how much of this has changed. And I checked everything that had changed. And then I didn't check. And then I circled everything that didn't change.
Good.
And I was like, what do they have in common? And what they had in common was the things that I checked that got done were just things that I acknowledged and never thought about again. The ones that hadn't changed were the ones that I was like beating myself up for. And so it's I think having the goals, having the accountability is beautiful, but as soon as it becomes a shame cycle, it locks it into place.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So that was really good, where we unpacked child development as well, where we unpacked like what you're working on with tide turners and how that directly applies to business and relationships. This is all great. What do you think is then the future of self-actualization? We're coming into an era where human capital is good for repetitive work is not going to be needed. We're entering in more of like an ethical and moral dilemma with regarding geopolitics, with artificial intelligence and biotechnology and all these different pressing sort of technologies around us. Yeah, where do you think actualization will come with augmented reality technologies that can help us with educational processes?
Yeah.
Kind of like, what are you thinking about this?
Yeah, so short term's pretty easy. What's happening is corporations, especially cutting edge corporations that need to attract talent, are making human development more and more front and center. They have to. Because the fact of the matter is, I'm going to make a boatload of money, and somebody else can make me more boatloads of money. So why do I stay at your place? And I stay because I'm satisfied, because I'm happy. And if I belong to a community of people who are effective and that feels good, and we're all growing, we don't lose people. That's what we really want, and so that's what we stay for. And the companies that are doing that have great retention rates and have great performance. So I think that's absolutely moving in that direction, especially when it comes to where you really need talent. Probably not going to happen so much in farming. Probably more going to happen in things like software. But I think that's one movement that's occurring. The second thing is
beanbags and free food.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Right. Exactly. Like at some point that wears off, and it's like, do I feel connected with these people?
Yeah.
Do I feel like I'm growing as a person? Like if I leave this job, am I scared that I'm going to stop? Am I going to lose a community I care about? If I leave this job, do I lose performance that I care about, meaningful work that I care about? If I leave this job, do I lose self-growth that I care about?
Yeah.
Those become the things and they've always been the things that really motivate people. It's just, we're learning that. It's really effective, especially with the cultural creative class. And so that's happening. I think the other thing is more and more technology is going to start having an effect on how we do things, from virtual reality to heart rate variability stuff, but I think we're just at the beginning of that. There's a technology recently you put it on and it like puts you in a meditative state super quickly. Lots of alpha waves, balances the brain waves from left and right brain. So there's all sorts of that kind of stuff that's happening. Mm-hmm. You're also seeing electromagnetic stimulation of the brain from the external. So there's going to be a whole bunch of that stuff. And then AI is going to be obviously really interesting. I can't tell you what it looks like 2 years out, but over 2 years out, but I can say this is the stuff that's coming in the next couple years. My belief is that we are meant to evolve, so we will evolve. But evolving looks like the stock market, right? Mm-hmm. So sometimes there's down, sometimes there's up. I'm not smart enough to catch those, but I know overall that this is the trajectory that we've been on and will be on for quite some time.
Yeah. All the neuroscience in real time of measuring that, and then being able to make changes to balance people out towards equanimity. Yeah. That is kind of nuts.
Right. And then what is equanimity as compared to what is having an open heart, as compared to truth. Just because I'm able to transcend my sense of self doesn't mean that I have a big open heart loving people. And so there's different things, and we'll start to measure those, and really fascinating stuff on the horizon there. I think generally where I see it happening is that there's kind of two levels of our society. The level of our society that's succeeding, this is going to become a more and more important issue. The level of our society that is not succeeding, it's going to become more and more fire in the system.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be extinguished through the race in consciousness.
One hopes, yeah.
One hopes, yeah.
That's the race.
And one taking action to get to that as well, to get there. Yeah. Okay, couple quick questions on the way out that I think are really important. You have Ty Turner's coming up this weekend. Yeah,
last one for the year. Yeah,
we'll have a link in the bio as well, of course.
There's like 3 slots left, so
get in.
Get in if you're going to do it,
in Berkeley.
Berkeley, correct.
Berkeley.
Yeah. Dharma College. Yeah.
Dharma College. So a couple quick questions on the way out. We typically like to ask our guests about this to hear what their thoughts are. Yeah. What do you think about us being alone in the cosmos?
Statistically super unlikely. Yeah. And also what I would say is, if you are the cosmos, how are you not alone, or how are you alone?
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense.
If you are the cosmos, how are you alone? Yeah. That's interesting. I like that.
Yeah.
And then, how about, do you think that you exist in this physical form, or do you think you exist elsewhere?
I think I don't exist.
You think you don't exist?
Yeah. A funny story on that. I had a bumper sticker that said, "Honk if you don't exist." And I was in LA. And the funniest thing was nobody honked. And like 3 times in LA in 8 years, people honked. And every time they did, I was like, "What?
Whoa.
I was so angry.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, they're honking at that thing, which was this beautiful reminder of my own consciousness. But
teach us why you think that.
The sense of self is okay. So here it is. In everybody's mind, there's a voice in the head, and the voice in the head might say something like, "You really need to exercise more," or might say, "You should develop more," or whatever. So which one is you? Is it the one that's talking, or is it the one that it's talking to? Like, which one of those is you? And if that is me, then why can't I control it? Like, I can say I'm walking because I'm walking, but if I say I'm thinking, it's kind of weird because I can't stop myself from doing it, which means it's like, who's the me there? That's what I mean. I mean that the sense of self, when it sees what it truly is, it's not a me anymore.
Okay, so once you start digging in, you realize that the sense of self is an illusion.
Correct. It's
okay.
a construct of thoughts.
It's a construct of thoughts.
Yeah.
Okay, so then where do you take that in relation to non-existing?
Right. Yeah. Right. So just to go back on it for a second, like, so if I cut you in half, which side is you, right? Like, so there's all these ways we define ourselves. Well, my physical form, but I'm different physically today than I was yesterday. So which one of those is me? So there's the physical form, and then there's the identity of thought form, which is I'm the person who's been thinking all this stuff, but I can't control that thought, and am I different if I'm thinking different stuff? So all of that means that the sense of self that we identify as an I is the illusion. But that doesn't mean that this doesn't exist. Here it is, apparently.
Okay, so the I is the illusion, but
Yeah.
the physical form is real?
Apparently.
Apparently. Okay.
Apparently.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think that we are in a simulation?
Yeah. Yes, I think we're in a simulation. I'm not sure if it's computer automated simulation.
Sure.
I actually think that the simulation is. So what's interesting is, I just was talking about this. Okay, you're gonna have to give me a little patience. Okay, so the idea is that there's something generating our simulation, and we're walking around in the simulation. I would suppose that the simulation is actually in the brain. Like, we see these colors because our simulation model sees these colors instead of a higher spectrum. Mm-hmm. Like, we are capable of X kinds of thoughts and not other kinds of thoughts because our simulation. So it's a pretty clear thought process for a very long time that most of what we see is a projection. Both physically, I'm only seeing like a quarter around, everything else is generated by the brain's algorithms, right? So there's both that, and that's neuroscience, a known fact. So we're generating through calculation, so to speak, our world around us. We know that that's happening, but we also are projecting, like, if I think it's really cool to wear a green shirt, then I'm gonna think that you think I'm cool for having the green shirt. If I think green sucks, I'm gonna think that you think you're judging me because I'm wearing green. Like, that's how we walk around the world. Like, somebody who wants to be rich thinks everybody thinks it's cool if they're rich, right? We just project. We project all over the place. So that's the way in which I see we're walking around in a simulation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that's a good perspective. Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, and then last question.
Yeah.
Last question is, what do you think's the most beautiful thing in the world
right now?
It's a great answer.
Great questions. Yeah, never get asked those questions. It's really fun. Yeah.
So right now.
Yeah.
Okay, over and over again.
Yeah. That's all I got.
That's all I got. Yeah. Yeah. That's great, Joe. That's so good. Thank you.
You're welcome, man. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I hit the mic.
This has been such a pleasure.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you coming on the show and teaching us about what you're working on, why it's important, and sharing with us all this unique perspective. Really, it's great.
Cool.
Thank you.
I enjoyed it. Thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to exploring more.
Cool.
Yeah.
I hope that happens. Yeah.
Yes. I want to thank everyone for tuning in. If you guys had a good time, give us a comment below with your thoughts. We would love to hear from you. Also, don't just consume, go and create, go and make a blog, go and make art, go and make business, go and make video, go and create with this. We want to give a shout out to Michael Mankey, our producer director for this show. Thank you. Huge thanks to Michael. And join us in more conversations in the future. Join us in the community. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Much love.